Aloha and welcome to the favorite part of your Thursday afternoon. We are the Hawaii Food and Farmer Series. I'm your co-host, Justine Spiritu. This is my sidekick, Matthew Johnson. Thank you, Think Tech, for giving us this time slot. Every week we bring on Hawaii's food producers as well as other organizations and individuals that are an important part of our food system.
So this week, as always, we have another great show, another great guest. With us today is Kerry Kakazu from MetroGrow Hawaii, and going to talk about growing food indoors. So kind of a relatively new concept that's been happening really across the country and also the world. And so we're very excited to talk to Kerry about that. How does that work? And Kerry, thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Justine and Matt. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and I know you've been on some other Think Tech Hawaii shows before, so you're kind of used to this, getting pretty popular. And also there was an article that just came out in the Honolulu magazine talking about your operations, so congratulations.
Thanks.
Something like things are going really well and getting busy and excited to hear more about it.
Yeah, great.
But yeah, before we get into MetroGrow Hawaii, just give us a little background on you. I know you had experience at University of Hawaii and just kind of a little background on who is Kerry.
Okay, well, actually my background is in biology. I have a BS in biology from the University of Hawaii. And my graduate degree is in plant physiology from the University of California, Davis. So I've always been interested in biology and plant science. And growing was more just a hobby. My actual degree work was in biochemistry. So my big joke was I always grinded up the plants and killed them instead of growing them. So it's quite a reverse now.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. It's a little bit different situation. But that plant physiology background definitely has helped me in understanding the things that I need to do to hopefully do a successful farm. Like I said, so it's been a hobby for a while, and I didn't really think of it as a business until I started seeing a lot more of the local food scene coming on board and people interested in getting food that was produced in Hawaii. And I've always been interested in the technology aspects of trying to apply that to growing. So sort of the combination of those two things.
Cool. So give us some background on MetroGrow Hawaii. So you kind of had this biology background, and you're like, okay, I'm tired of killing the plants. Now I want to try and grow them.
Sure.
And I know you're located in Kakaako now. How did that all come about? And give us a little bit story on the start.
Like I said, growing was a thing that I was always interested in. Although probably not the type to sit there in the fields all day and get sunburned. So again, trying to do technology, and so I've always been interested in hydroponics, which is a growing of plants in without soil, usually in some sort of solution. So again, just the technology and being able to sort of manipulate all the different variables for growing sort of appealed to me. So again, just as a hobby level. And then on the commercial side, people had done it a little bit outdoors mostly. Indoors was really tough because initially the lights that were used for hydroponics indoors were these 1,000-watt high-intensity lamps. The marijuana growers, of course, knew all about them.
Oh yeah.
And
Justine knows all about that. I'm just kidding.
And it works. And of course, if you have a high-value crop like that, then it's worthwhile. But economically, for growing vegetables, there's just no way. So I just sort of followed it as a hobby. But then what happened was LEDs started to come on the scene. And I saw that you could get by with a lot less wattage for similar amounts of light. So that, again, the confluence of that with the idea of more people interested in local food production. And then the thought that Hawaii doesn't have a lot of space, a lot of land. There's going to be pressure on ag lands for sure. Just got me sort of interested. And then I started seeing things like what's happening in Singapore. They do a lot of vertical farming, I guess is the word they call it. And it's a similar situation. It's a fairly tropical climate, small space, lots of people, and they're growing things on top of buildings and in independent buildings. So I thought, maybe Hawaii could do this too. So that sort of was the genesis of how I thought maybe this could be a commercial venture.
Well, that's interesting. So it seemed like kind of like three different things that you were seeing. So the LED light bulb, so that your cost of production was going down with the new technology, and then the trend of people looking for buying local, wanting to support that movement. There's a third one that you mentioned. I already forget. But yeah, so it sounds like you're kind of seeing these different things happening and then taking advantage of that. How did you end up in the space where you are now? Because that was obviously a big factor in to figure out.
So the urban part, obviously is a lot more expensive to be in town. But I thought another attraction, how more local can you get than being right next to the restaurants you're serving? And sort of the funny thing initially was I used to work at the University of Hawaii Cancer Center right down there on the in Kakaako. So when I first started, it was a part-time job. So part of the reason I selected the space was because I could go back and forth easily between the two locations. So I could just pop in and check on the plants and then go back and forth. But as I got used to staying there, then I realized, hey, this is the place where a lot of these restaurants are coming up that are interested in this kind of produce and having something really fresh. The concept of food miles comes into play too. When I can walk it down the block, and I've actually taken my bicycle and brought stuff over to restaurants. So you're talking less than a mile, less than a food mile. So that was appealing too. So I think the Kakaako part has become kind of a convenience marketing tool, but I see it as a big advantage in that I can easily. Chefs can call me up and say, gee, do you have this? Can I get it today? And I can pop on down pretty easily. So that was one of the main reasons to be sort of in the urban area. And plus the name is MetroGrow, so it's not suburban grow. So I kind of needed to be in town, I thought.
So when your operation started, did you start with having a market, like you knew a couple restaurants that were interested in sourcing locally, and were you able to displace some of the items that they were bringing in?
Yeah, it wasn't so much any one particular restaurant, just the idea that I kept reading these things that, chefs are always looking for local products and trying to source things. And of course, chefs also want to look for unique things, new things, things that aren't grown by other people. So again, with the indoor farming, you can grow things that are harder to grow outdoors or things that are new and at such a small scale that I can easily start producing something new quickly. So that was sort of just from there. I do have DK Kodama, who has at that time with Vino and Hiroshi Sansei, was a classmate of mine. So he was one of the first people I contacted and asked, can I meet your chefs? And that's sort of he was the first customer actually.
So give us a little background for maybe some people who aren't familiar with hydroponics. So when you walk in, so you're in this room, warehouse type space in Kakaako. When you walk in, what do people expect to see inside? It's very much, it looks kind of like a food laboratory in some ways. It's not quite as clean, but it has racks, and so that's why the term vertical farming is used to describe this kind of growing. So the idea is that you have a small space, so you can't just plant one layer, you plant multiple layers on stacks. So I have what are food racks, food shelving. Okay.
And so there's usually 3 or 4 layers of plastic tubs, and again, food tubs. And on top of these tubs are sheets of plastic which are supporting the plants. And in typical hydroponics, those roots would be sort of floating on top of a solution, a water surface, so it's usually styrofoam. What I do is a little bit different. It's a variation called aeroponics. And instead of having a continuous flow of water or a big reservoir of water, the roots are just misted periodically with the nutrient solution. So they have a lot more oxygen that way, and the theory is that they will grow a lot faster. And it seems to be true. The lettuces, especially that I grow, seem to do a lot better in the aeroponics versus the hydroponics. So if you come in, you'll see these tubs, individual little tubs with multiple lettuce heads growing there. They're all under the LED lights, so it gives it a little bit of a high-tech look. And again, because there's multiple levels, you kind of have to have supplemental light. You can't really rely on sunlight. But it's pretty bright. LEDs do a good job of putting out light. It's a little cooler. Again, I purposely keep the temperature down a little bit so that I can raise some of these lettuces and other plants and herbs that are more cold weather adapted. It's a small space. It's only 800 square feet right now. So everything's pretty packed in there. So it's a real high density farm. So that's the other thing that's interesting about it.
Very cool.
So being kind of a high-tech operation, is there kind of a high upfront cost to these
Yeah.
kinds of tools and equipment?
Right. So that's probably the two biggest disadvantages of this kind of growing. Number one is there's a fairly large startup cost to, again, probably because I'm doing aeroponics also, the pumps that are necessary, the nozzles, constructing all that, the racks, and then all that equipment. And there's timers to be had, and the LED lights are still a pretty big cost. Although that technology has really brought the energy cost down, it still hasn't, it's not quite at that level where it's, like buying a light bulb from the drugstore. It's still something that costs a little bit of money. So those are the big ticket items. And then, of course, the operating expenses, the electricity required would be the other big expense. And then being in Kakaako, rent, of course.
So, Kerry, what kind of products are you growing? Like, what kind of products and what restaurants are you working with, and what are they doing with your products?
Okay. So I started off mostly with the lettuces. So I have two varieties right now, butter lettuce, and it's a special variety. It's kind of a dwarf, I guess you could call it. So it forms these fairly small, compact heads, but really nice leaf layout. So people have commented it kind of looks like a rose bouquet, in some ways. So that lettuce is used whole by a Vino restaurant in Restaurant Row, and they just kind of splay it out and serve it like that as a whole salad. The other lettuce that I have is a more spiky leaf lettuce, and that's going to Teppanyaki Onodera. It's a fairly high-end teppanyaki place, and they serve it whole also in a glass, studded with other vegetables. So that's been kind of the market right now. It's these specialty lettuces that are a little bit mini types that can be individual servings for the people. And again, the nice thing with indoor farming is I can kind of manipulate the conditions so that those things grow to the size that they're looking for. The other big product, Microgreens, again, sort of for high-end use, garnishes, micro scallions, pretty popular. Mud Hen Water uses that, and Stage Restaurant over at the Furniture, Inspiration Furniture, uses that quite a bit also. Pea Shoots and Corn Shoots are another items. Micro Sorrel, which has a nice lemony taste, is another popular one, and Micro Chervil is the other one that I'm growing quite a bit of. And then the final one that's really interesting that a lot of restaurants are starting to get interested in is ice plant. It's also called glacier lettuce. And this is a succulent. It's related to that ground cover that you see on some of the golf courses here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Really watery, or it's a succulent basically. But this one is an edible version, and what's unusual about it is it accumulates salt from whatever growing environment it has. So here's the advantage of hydroponics again. I can actually add salt to the solution. That actually makes it grow a little faster. And then it picks up that salt and in these cells along the edges of the leaves, and it looks really like ice crystals. That's how it gets its name. And so it has a salty, kind of crunchy taste. Reminds me of a kind of like a ready-made pickle, salty and a little bit tangy and real succulent.
Almost sounds like sea asparagus too.
Yeah, so it's similar, but it's a lot softer and not quite as salty as a sea asparagus. So Vino's using that in some of their salad mixes, and Yohei Sushi will just garnish their sashimi plates with that. And a lot more chefs are asking about that just because it is so unusual. And recently we had, there was a promotion for the salt complex down in Kakaako, that retail complex. So they asked me to have some kind of ice plant dish. So Tango Cafe, who's also a customer, helped me and prepared the dish, and got a lot of good response on that. People were very interested in what kind of green that was and where they could get it from. Yeah. So those are the main products right now.
Nice.
That's awesome. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm always interested, you just listed a ton of products and partners you're collaborating with, and I'm always interested when you're featuring a particular product, the influence that maybe the chef had on the grower or what that kind of relationship is. So we're going to take a quick break and get right back to that.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hito. My show is called Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to discuss solutions to global problems on climate change facing people, nations, and the world. Join me here every Tuesday at 1 o'clock on Think Tech Hawaii. Aloha and bye-bye.
Aloha, this is Reg Baker and I am the host of Business in Hawaii. We talk about positive stories of businesses in Hawaii, how they have been successful and how they have overcome some of the obstacles that a lot of us encounter when we try to have a business here. And believe it or not, there are a number of positive stories here and we want to talk to all of you. So we broadcast live every Thursday at 2 o'clock. And it rebroadcasts again on Olelo Channel 54. So I sure hope to see you next time. Please tune in on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Aloha and welcome back to Hawaii Food and Farmer Series. I'm your co-host Justine Spiritu. This is my co-host Matthew Johnson. Today's guest is Kerry Kakazu with MetroGrow. So you, right before the end of our last segment, you were kind of listing off a number of products you had, and I'm kind of curious of how you came in to kind of specialize into some of these products. Are these the easy ones with the method you're growing, or did the chefs kind of initiate to you, hey, we want to try this? So if you can kind of explain that.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of both. I went into it thinking, okay, well, at first I just needed to get some crop that I knew I could grow pretty easily. And the lettuce is obviously our first choice, just something that most people seem to want to use. This particular variety I just picked because it was something that was unusual and something, again, that local growers weren't really growing. And so that's why I thought my niche was try and grow stuff that is not readily available. And then it became, okay, here's what I have. This is something that appeals to you. And then the restaurants would say, yeah, but could you do something like this? Or we want this color versus that color. So that's what I was hoping, actually, was that the chefs would really tell me, we want this. It actually hasn't quite worked out that way. Some chefs are pretty particular. Most chefs are, well, not most, but a lot of chefs are, what do you have? And just show me, and then I'll pick something I want. So it's been a combination of both. The other end of the spectrum that was really interesting was that teppanyaki restaurant I mentioned, Japanese chefs. So maybe they're a little bit more particular, but they said, oh yeah, that butter lettuce is nice, but we want something that is this size, that has spiky leaves, that grows this way, and can you grow that? So I said, oh, okay, I could try. So I basically got like 6 different varieties of lettuce seeds that kind of looked like what they were looking for. I grew them all, and then gave them samples, and then they picked the one that they wanted. So again, I think that's the advantage of this small scale indoor farm, is that I can easily test all these different varieties out pretty quickly.
It almost sounds like you're a caterer in the sense of like doing a tasting before an event where you offer, well, here's a few different things, which one do you like? Right. And I imagine, like you said, other typical larger farms wouldn't have that flexibility that you probably have. That's
what I'm guessing. Maybe some of them can, and they have greenhouses or other things, but that's sort of the niche that I was looking for again. And so I always ask the chefs, let me know what you want to grow. Basically, sometimes I just give them my seed catalog and say, look at these pictures. If you see anything you like, let me know, and I'll try and grow it. And so sometimes that, a couple of things have come through where, especially for the microgreens, that there's such a wide variety of things that we can grow as small shoots and microgreens that the chefs were interested in that. Another one that I customized when Vino was open at Restaurant Row. They wanted pea shoots, and so they, I was providing that. And they said, well, this pea shoot is a little bit chewy on the stem, and so again, I manipulated the conditions. I grew them in the dark first, so that they would grow taller and a little bit thinner, and then only turn on the lights at the end, so they green up but still be pretty soft. And that's again the kind of things you can do in a controlled environment that would be tough in a regular farm.
So one of the things I'm real curious about, and it's great that you're seems like you're really getting to know your market and kind of working backwards from there versus, maybe some other traditional farms where they grow what they grow and that's it. But in terms of your cost, do you have a sense, and I know you've got the startup costs and there's startup costs with a traditional farm as well, but as you're this is going into your 3rd year of production, do you have a sense of how costs compare, like your costs compare versus if you were doing it in a traditional soil-based farming operation?
I think for sure it still costs more, and I don't have any real hard data, But this is what the industry trends seem to indicate. The vertical farming, there's a few groups on the mainland that compile some of these statistics. And everybody sort of realizes it's an adjunct to traditional farming. The costs are higher, primarily because of the energy and land costs. I've just been seeing the news about some of these leases for ag land are pretty inexpensive. And obviously, if you're renting a space that's industrial, commercial space, then it's quite a bit higher. So I think those two costs, again, are the ones that make it still a more expensive way to grow. On the other hand, with the way high density and there's a lot of opportunity for automation, labor costs are probably pretty much lower. Right now, it's been for the last few years a one-man operation. So you can keep those costs down. Obviously, transportation costs are going to be a lot less. I don't have to pay for machinery like tractors and things like that. So I think those costs come down. So really, it's the energy. I think that maybe will be the next thing for me to look at to bring it down to be comparable. And I have a feeling that for some crops, it may actually be possible to get it down to a level where it might be able to be produced competitively with outdoor farming. The LEDs, again, are getting more efficient. The technology hasn't stood still. So I can, for example, when I first started, I was using these panels that were about 100, maybe 300 watts of electricity for a row of lettuce. Now with some of these higher efficiency LEDs, I've gotten that down to about 75 watts.
Wow.
And again, since LEDs don't give off a lot of heat, I can get them real close to the plants. And in fact, in some cases, I had to turn the lights off for a while because it was too much light. So some plants, like lettuces, they don't need the full sun. And in fact, most people that grow in Hawaii will probably grow them under shade anyway. So why you think, wow, the sun's free, but you got to pay for these lights. There's some economy that you work out that because you can get them close, because you don't need that much light for that plant, it actually doesn't cost that much in electricity to grow those plants. And the sun is actually an excess of light. So again, for those kind of crops, I think there's an opportunity where you could be cost competitive. Things that are fruiting, like tomatoes and melons, et cetera, maybe not, because they need a lot more light and a longer growth cycle.
I'm curious if you've experimented with any other crops besides lettuces.
So like I said, this ice plant would be the one that is really popular. That was kind of discovered by accident. Somebody in Japan was growing it, and I had visited their farm to look at their lights, actually, and then they introduced me to that crop. I'm also trying to grow other cool weather crops, so spinach. The local spinaches are sort of a heat-tolerant variety, but the smooth leaf spinaches that you usually get in the bags are usually a cooler weather crop. So that seems to grow pretty well. This other one called mosh. It's what's it called? Lamb's lettuce or corn salad, I think are the other names. That's another very cool weather crop. And so the chefs have been interested. I haven't been able to grow enough yet, but that's something when I mentioned it to them, they said, oh yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that.
And those kind of crops could only be grown in Hawaii in this kind of environment?
Probably in a controlled
indoor
environment. For example, the butter lettuces grow in kula, so cooler microclimates. So you'd have to either have the right microclimate or grow it indoors.
Which I think is kind of interesting. I think one thing we talk about with local food is this idea of eating seasonally, and kind of accepting your limited options in a way. And so this is another avenue to...
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going for too, that, some restaurants want that seasonality. The farm-to-table movement. So it says, okay, I'm going to grow or feed you what's growing at the peak at that time. But on the other hand, I figured, and it's mostly true, restaurants also are very interested in having a fairly consistent supply of crops, being able to feature something on the menu regularly. And so I thought this kind of growing would be that opportunity also, where I wouldn't be as bound by the seasons or a sudden downpour. This summer was a good example. Lots of farms I know are getting hit hard by the heavy rains. So people are asking me, do we have any extra microgreens? Because they couldn't get some of it.
And you mentioned before, like looking at some other similar like vertical farm operations around the country. I know there's a big one in Philadelphia and Chicago. What have you seen that may be inspirational for you and what you may want to do?
Yeah, the thing interesting about those operations is I'm just amazed at how big they're trying to scale up to.
Yeah.
I always thought, well, you're going to have to do this small and you're going to limited market. But, and of course, I don't know if these guys are profitable yet, but, we're talking some of the largest one, I think the Chicago one is like 90,000 square feet.
Wow.
And, I'm in 800, so it's a little bit different.
Almost
but,
there.
Yeah, they're in a little while. But they're doing aquaponics too, so they have fish tanks.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know how they're doing the indoor aquaponics and plants. They grow a lot of basil, I think is one of their main
Okay.
crops, so herbs and a little bit higher end stuff too.
Mm.
A new one that's coming up in New Jersey, I think is 69,000 square feet.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm just amazed at, or I'm curious, is what where are these markets? Are people really going to pay a little bit more for this hydroponically grown product? How important is it that it's grown this way? Of course, they have the advantage of being in a market where it's a larger population, and they can easily move it. Again, maybe it sort of defeats the purpose, but at least in a fairly small scope, you can still truck it out to a neighboring state or a neighboring city.
Right.
Maybe not as far as the traditional farms, but it's a little bit bigger market than Hawaii is. So I think that's probably how they do it. So for myself, I'm encouraged that, hey, if people are willing and able to pay a little bit more, knowing that you're going to have a fairly high quality product, grown without pesticides, conserving water, that doesn't travel very far, and don't mind paying for that a little bit extra, then that indicates that even in Hawaii, hopefully that will happen too.
Cool. So one of the things, I was talking to Kai Fox before, kind of like the aquaponics guru, and he was kind of talking about it's easy to do aquaculture indoors, and you mentioned that some of these other operations on the mainland may be doing aquaponics for growing crops as well. Have you looked into that? Is that something? And so aquaponics being more where you're instead of putting in your mix of nutrients, you're using fish for the most part as your
So I went into it sort of just with the hydroponics and aquaponics. When I first started, aquaponics wasn't even sort of on most people's radar at the time. Yeah. And being a plant physiologist, I don't know that much about fish anyway. So I kind of had it in my mind, okay, it's hydroponics. They're these ready-made fertilizers that are easy to get, and I don't have to do anything. So that's kind of how I got into it. Then aquaponics started really picking up, and I see the benefits of it. Again, like you say, you can generate your own fertilizer. But I made a sort of conscious decision because I was really going after a sort of customized market. My opinion is that it's a lot harder to control the plant variables, obviously, if you're doing an aquaponic system, because the fish are going to do what they do. You can't. It's hard enough to control the plants.
Just add some more fish or take out some fish.
I didn't think that I wanted to handle that other level of complexity with the fish in there. So I think it's a great system that you can get this balance and sort of be really sustainable. But I didn't have any experience or see what market I would have for the fish product. There is enough people. How much tilapia are we going to eat in Hawaii? I didn't see that, so I kind of made a conscious decision to really focus on the hydroponic end. And being a biologist, what I see is that you have a fish system and you have a plant system. So you can optimize this one or you can optimize that one. But if you want both to support each other, then it's really a trade-off. It's going to be an equilibrium situation. So if you have a market for both, then you can get extra money, but you're not going to get the most productivity out of either one, I think.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take one more quick break. And great to kind of hear the progression of how your business has developed. And since we're kind of talking about the whole local food system, when we come back, we're going to see how that kind of integration with what else is going on, how that fits into your business model and future.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Aloha, how you doing? I'm Gordo the Tech Czar here on Think Tech Hawaii, where we co-host Hibachi Talk, where we talk about technology and bring in all kinds of cool guests. Also, my co-host with me today is
Andrew the security guy. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Think Tech Hawaii, and thanks for watching Hibachi Talk. We also have Angus.
And you there, lad. It's Angus. I bring in all kinds of wee things. Oh, look, you see my lips moving. Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on Think Tech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the security guy, every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
And welcome back to Hawaii Food and Farmer Series. I'm your co-host, Matthew, and this is my co-host, Justine. And today we are talking to Kerry Kakazu with MetroGrow Hawaii. And we're kind of moving into the next segment here of what's the next steps for MetroGrow and where do you see this going? And also, too, do you see this being a viable, another, I guess, option for growing food in Hawaii? Like, how big do you think this can go?
Okay, so yeah, we talked a little bit in the last segment about the mainland farms, so that's encouraging that maybe there is a market for this kind of growing on a larger scale. For myself, right now I'm sort of working on a next level business plan, and when I start analyzing the numbers, and again, it still I think costs more to grow this way, partly because of the size. But I really see my niche right now as it's still sort of a boutique farm, being able to talk to the chefs and say, I can grow you this, I can grow you that. And I think that's the market for the foreseeable future. So I'm looking to get a little bit larger already. I'm kind of close to maxing out the space I have now. So maybe double or a little bit over double the size now, I think would support enough of the local market. Next step, I think, I haven't really done much retail directly to customers yet. Because again, the lettuces I'm growing are sort of specialty ones. They look really nice for a plate. Maybe that's something you really somebody wouldn't want to take home necessarily because it costs so much. But I think with Whole Foods coming in a few years, Foodland Farms right down in Ala Moana, that's another opportunity. And if I grow maybe a little bit more. Not normal lettuce, but a little bit more consumer level.
Maybe CSA
products.
bags as another option?
CSA bags, yep, for Wild Fresh or something
We know
like
a few.
But, that market I haven't even done yet. I haven't even been to a farmer's market yet. So I think that's the other natural way to go. Getting more restaurants, obviously, I think will be the next thing. And it's all been word of mouth so far. So I think maybe just going out, doing a little bit more samplings, open houses, just to get the word out that we're here. But there's so many new restaurants coming on board and that all are very interested in sourcing locally. I think there's definitely an untapped market there. So that's, I think, the immediate future. Larger scale, we talked a little bit before we came in here about, maybe integrating this with composting or anaerobic digestion, and then maybe integrating a community garden. I see that as a really neat direction that something like this could go in. That we could take the farm waste, could take food waste, digest it, make some compost, get some energy for the farm, and then put the compost in a community garden kind of situation. So I think there's that level of integration too for a sustainability project. That would be, I think, a really nice direction to go also. Super large scale, again, I don't know if Hawaii's market is big enough. There's the aquaponic operations, Mari's Gardens, Kunia Country Farms are all also growing lettuces too. So maybe we're not quite big enough to do at that level. But again, with farmers markets and supermarkets coming on board, I think it still could go. And again, as the technology increases or it gets better and the cost can come down, and we start being able to be competitive, I think there's definitely a future to not just be a boutique farm, to say that, okay, we can grow these things cost competitively with a traditional farm with using 80% or 90% less water, no pesticides, without affecting the land, because we don't put any runoff into the back into the soil, and so we not only conserve the agricultural land, but basically preserve it. It could be converted to something else in some respects, and then just do our food without having that much impact on the environment. I think we're a ways from that yet. Again, a lot of technology we have to improve. But in Hawaii, you know, we have alternative energy sources, I think, that are viable. That's one of the biggest costs. So then it will become the cost of the space.
Do you think that makes Hawaii uniquely ready for this kind of method?
Yeah, that's interesting. When I first came in, I started looking at the costs, and I thought, you know, in some ways, this is probably the worst place to be a vertical farm because
But it's going
yeah,
to be
because
going in the opposite
yeah,
direction.
because the electricity costs are so ridiculously high, and the land costs are really high. But you know, now that solar energy and other alternative energies are so prevalent here, I think that it sort of has reversed that trend that, hey, yeah, I can use these sources. I could do solar to bring a lot of the costs down. And well, I can't do anything about the land costs yet, but you know, there is a possibility here that we could do a lot more than some other areas. And again, maybe there's a way of bringing in the solar for lighting too, just solar tubes or other technologies coming on board that will actually be used for lighting. And again, since we have so much solar energy, I think there's an opportunity that is in Hawaii that would not be elsewhere. The other thing is we don't need to heat anything. A lot of the vertical farms on the mainland actually have to heat their buildings during the winter. Of course, I have to cool my building, so that's a little bit different.
Probably pretty hot in there.
Yeah, but you know, the heating costs are probably higher than the cooling costs in some ways. So that's another advantage that Hawaii has. And again, with all the pressure on the space that we have, I think that's going to be something where, yeah, we want to grow something high density.
One of the things I was curious about is, are you envisioning, and is it even possible to go towards an organic certification with what you're doing? I mean, you mentioned some of the markets. I'm sure the Whole Foods and Foodland Farms would be ecstatic if you had an organic product.
Yeah, I've been looking at that, and you know, most of the chefs would hope that I had organic, but they're more interested in, I think, right now, sustainably grown, and so no pesticides and no other harsh chemicals. And the other aspect that even is hard, I think, for organic growers is I can not guarantee, but I can tell you it's cleaner. And this is a big thing for the farms that do this in Japan. There's no contamination from, you know, some animal walking by your plot or anything like that. So, in fact, one company I went to and visited, they said, "Oh yeah, here's our lettuce," and we tell people don't wash it at home because our factory is cleaner than your house. Basically, is what they were saying. So you know, that level of cleanliness is again something that can be done in the vertical farm situation. So there's an advantage. So the organic hasn't been as big a factor, but you know, again, I'm interested in being sustainable. So obviously, aquaponics would be one way of trying to get towards that organic certification. But one thing I'm really interested in, I've seen some research, and I'm trying to do some experiments, is some scientists in Japan again have actually taken like organic matter and then converted it into nutrient solution for plants without the fish, just by using the bacteria that break it down. So making sort of an artificial composter almost in some ways, just for nutrient solution, and then feeding that to the plants, and they've been pretty successful at that. So I think that would be a really interesting avenue to try. And there's again a couple of customers that have asked me, "Oh, can you grow this organically?" And so I think that would be maybe the approach that I would take. Fortunately, there's also a group, the people who sort of dictate how the organic certification goes, are pushing to not allow hydroponics to be certified organic. Because they feel that to be certified organic, you have to actually help to restore the soil.
Interesting.
And so since hydroponics doesn't use soil, you know, they say, it shouldn't qualify. So there's a kind of a thing going on. I know Fred Lau at Murray's Gardens is kind of on some committee, I guess, that is looking at that and pushing, obviously, from his side that he wants hydroponics to be organic. But that'll be an interesting development to see how that goes. My argument would be, well, hey, I don't even touch the soil.
Yeah.
So
How much safer can you be?
you should get your own certification.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Just get a stamp and put it on there.
yeah.
Yeah,
Now
well,
it's-
Stamp by
that's always
Kerry.
really fascinating to see those kind of labels, who gets to define those
Yeah.
kind of things. And then it's kind of about your communication with your markets
Yeah,
of what that
exactly,
means. And
exactly.
just create your own certification.
Yeah. So and so it hasn't been, like I said, that big an issue so far. But again, just for my own, and I'm always interested in trying to do these things as sustainably as possible. So I kind of like to play around with that. But again, it'll be tough depending on how these regulations end up coming out.
And so is you mentioned like Japan and Singapore, are those like the kind of the hotspots for research on this type of these methods?
Yeah, Japan especially, they call them plant factories there, the vertical farms. And so if you look at some of these, I mean, a lot of them are being built in converted semiconductor
Oh, okay.
factories.
Oh, okay.
So they're super clean already, and they just keep it clean. And you look at the pictures, and they're all wearing lab coats and they have masks
Yeah.
on. And I understand, it's the cleanliness, but it makes it look a little too frightening, like robotic.
It's interesting,
yeah.
I think, when because when we talk about local food, and one of the things when we talk about farmers, we have this particular vision
Yeah.
of being outside, being in the soil, being in the sun, and the whole
Getting
lab
dirty.
coat,
Yeah.
sterile environment kind of
Yeah.
counters that.
Yeah, so again, I understand, and being a plant physiologist, I know there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But it's a marketing and perception thing. People are thinking, well, somebody's growing my frankenfood in a laboratory, but really, I mean, they're just doing it cleanly and just trying to keep the bacterial contamination off for that reason. But if you're doing organically, and there's going to be bacteria anyway for the plants, the soil is full of bacteria that are beneficial for growing. So even in a hydroponic system, some people will try and get rid of as much of the bacteria as possible, but if you can make sure that you get the good bacteria going in there, it's really not harmful at all. So I haven't been as anal about keeping everything super sterile or anything like that.
Do you have a lab coat?
Not actually. That's a good point. I don't have one. I
We need to get you a
one.
laptop.
Yeah.
At least for a photograph.
Yeah. I don't want to wear the mask though. That's kind of frightening.
Yeah.
I think. It's like, what's wrong with these plants?
So we have about 30 seconds left. Any final things that you want to say about just local food in general and what you want to see
Yeah.
have happen?
Again, I think the idea is that this local food interest shows no signs of abating. I think it's great. I think it's healthier, it's fresher, supports the economy, it's probably cleaner, helps local restaurants also differentiate what they're doing from other places. So I hope it keeps going, obviously, and I hope people keep buying from small farmers, myself.
Yeah.
And again, I'm happy to be a part of that system. And I think if we can get more support from everybody to bring down some of the costs involved in growing this way or on a small scale, it'd be great. And that'll help the economy and help Hawaii.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Kerry. So it's another great show, and we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And thank you again for joining us on Hawaii Food and Farmers Series. Once again, we're here every Thursday at 4 o'clock, and you can check us out on YouTube channel at ThinkTechHI. Thank you. We'll see you next week.